Just think that about only 100 years ago, and for thousands of years before that, up until 100 years ago, scientists believed that there was but one galaxy, ours, the Milky Way. By their most optimistic count, there were about 10,000 stars in the heaven, and by their reckoning, they hung about 10 miles above the surface of Earth. Then about 100 years ago, along came a scientist by the name of Ed Hubble. And Ed Hubble said, I have a theory that what looks like just dust and gas and powder beyond our galaxy might not just be dust, but actually might be more galaxies. He died with that theory, as you know, but then NASA launched a telescope named in his honor, the Hubble, and it sent back pictures to planet Earth that proved his theory correct. But then, as groundbreaking as the Hubble was, then just a few years ago, we launched the Webb, with its capacity now to interpret infrared light, and it made the Webb telescope look like a dime store toy. I don't know if you're on the website, but every Friday, NASA will post the latest pictures from the Webb. And they all take your breath away. Not just the color and the size and the patterns of our universe, but at the utter size of our universe. David, little David, who wrote our psalm back then, or his astrologists, never could have guessed that there are billions of stars in our Milky Way galaxy alone, and there are billions of galaxies as big as our Milky Way are bigger, and they're all full of their billion stars. So that scientists say that it is no exaggeration to say that there are more stars than there are grains of sand on planet Earth. There are more stars and planets in our universe. They would outnumber all the English words that in its entirety has been spoken by all of humanity. Little did David know that the light we see shining from our closest star after the sun, the light from the second closest star, left that star at the time Shakespeare was directing his plays in London. And it's been traveling at the speed of light ever since, and we're just seeing that light today. Little did David know that if somehow we could get in our cars and set the cruise at 60 miles an hour to the sun, it would take us 200 years of nonstop driving just to get to the sun. Little did David know that in the amount of time that it just took me to speak this sentence, we have traveled together about 5,000 more miles in our little orbit together on planet Earth around the sun. And little did David know that by the time it takes me to speak this sentence, our universe has expanded another 350,000 miles. Just imagine how David's heart would have sung had he known all of this, how glorious and vast and unspeakable and marvelous is our creation. It's absolutely unbelievable. In fact, he says it. There are no words. And that's the pun. The pun of our psalm is that even though there is no sound in outer space, even though stars don't speak, David says, but I think they do. Just listen. It speaks a language, he says, that's glorious, verse 1, intelligent, verse 2, universal, verses 3 and 4. The language it all shouts at us is of a glorious God, its creator and maker. And then in verses 5 and 6, he just singles out one phenomenon as an example, and that is our sun. He says, just look at the sun. You all take it for granted, but have you ever noticed how every morning The sun comes out of its pavilion to run its course, just like a bridegroom comes out of his tent before that ancient wedding ceremony. And that sun runs that corset with all the grace and charm of an Olympic champion as she runs that last victory lap. Little did David know that the sun we see from our sun right now is already 8.5 minutes old. We see the sun as it was 8.5 minutes ago. Just imagine again how David would have thrilled with all of this, just how glorious and intricate and intriguing is God's creation. It's utterly unbelievable. Its maker's artistry and power and grandeur leaves one speechless. So you might conclude then that David would conclude his song here, that he would say, well, if there are no words, then this knowledge of God is simply too awesome for me, too incredible to worship. There's nothing we can do to respond. But no, David goes on to say just the opposite. David goes on to remind us that in a universe of all of these spinning planets, remember that this is the planet on which God chose to stage his infinite love. Just think, he says, the God who is bigger than all of this vast universe, who created it all, at the same time gave us immediate access to him through Jesus. Jesus shrunk that infinite space between God and us to the size of a person. And so the psalm continues. He moves our focus from the solar system to the sacred scrolls. And then David reminds us, God, of course, created everything we can see that we've already talked about and sung about in our psalm. But also remember that at the same time, God created everything we can't see. In other words, he created not just the parts, but then all the laws and principles and systems for how all these different parts would work together. And those unseen things are just as beautiful and powerful and elegant. Look at the cluster of nouns David puts together there in the middle. The law of the Lord, the precepts, the fear of the Lord, the ordinance of the Lord, the statutes of the Lord. And then look with them at all the clauses he uses to describe the unseen things of God. It too is perfect. It revives the soul, making wise the simple. It's right, giving joy to the heart. It's radiant, giving light to the eyes. It's pure, enduring forever. It's sure, altogether righteous. These laws are so valuable, he sums it up, to use today's language. He would say they're worth more than $1 million in the bank and sweeter than all your favorite desserts. Fascinating. Fascinating to me because I hear and see that we live in a society that teaches us this unspoken idea that, we have really received all the parts. And then it's sort of up to us, really, to decide how we want those parts to work or not work, or how to put it all together. The moral structure, the unseen things of the universe, are kind of up for a vote. Moral limits are whatever you decide. Write your own definition. But the psalmist would ask us, let me know how that's working for you. Here's an image, I think, that I hope will help. Think about this, the difference between the law of time and the law of the sun. Okay, the law of time is a human thing. We figured out how often the earth rotates in front of the sun each day. We created sundials and then calendars and then clocks and watches. We created time zones. And then here in the Midwest, we even said that we can tweak the time by an hour when it's more convenient for us to control the time. We don't like dark mornings at the bus stop for our kids in January, so we can change the clocks. If we don't like that, we can change our clocks back. And because then, at one time, somebody discovered that we didn't get the amount of time it takes to go around the sun quite right, we even packed in an extra day, once every 4 years in February, to make up for our mistake. Off the record, I've always wondered who was the brilliant guy who said, let's give the extra day in February. Why not June? Why not July? I mean, February's our best month, come on. But those are all our laws of time. We can tweak them. But the law of the sun is different. Though we can manipulate time, we cannot say to the sun, now, we want to stop you in May for an endless spring. We would like a double extra day at Christmas, so every December 25, could you just pause things? Of course not. It's a law that is built in, that's beyond our control. You can try to get around it. You don't have to like it. But the fact is, it's a universal law. David sees, you see, that there's not only laws of time, but more importantly, laws of the sun. Built-in systems created by God, the one who made it all and who understands the best of how it's all going to work together. And David says the wise are the people who get that and listen to it rather than try to fight it. So don't kill. Don't go after what's your neighbor's. Tell the truth. Don't hoard. Be generous. Don't con yourself into thinking that all these little things that you create are really God. Those laws are not some capricious rules that God came up with one day when he was bored to kind of prove that his muscles are bigger than our muscles. Of course not. What David is saying, you see, all those things show us how the parts work. They show us how we can align ourselves with something bigger, something greater than us. In a way, how we can really align ourselves with the stars of the universe. That God says, look at my creation. Look as far as you can to see its vastness, but at the same time, take it and look under a microscope to discover its micro intricacies. See how glorious it all is, micro and macro. And now look at all the laws that hold it all together. They're just as wonderful. Now study them. Not because I'm some neurotic God that has a need to control you and make you do things my way. Absolutely not. It's because I'm trying to show you how I made things to work. So align yourself with the geometry of the universe. It's good for you. Trust me. I made the user's manual for you to use, the Bible. Live it. Believe it. And as David said, that law fits us perfectly. Many years ago, I found myself in a courtroom at the Cook County Courthouse of Chicago. I had befriended a person who was in prison. We first communicated through correspondence when I was a seminary intern my year in Chicago. We had never met, but he was going to be sentenced for his crime. And he wondered if he had nobody else, if I would come, show up, and just sit with him. I said, I'll do that. I made the trip, and I found myself sitting with a complete stranger in circuit court. He had gotten into some really bad trouble in Cabrini Green. It's sobering, if you haven't done it, to sit in a courtroom with the string of cases that file before a judge, waiting your turn. And while we waited for our turn, I probably heard a dozen cases. An embezzler, several drug-related offenses, lots of petty theft. But what I still remember about that morning are not necessarily the specifics, but the comportment of the judge. I was so impressed because no matter how many people were packing his courtroom, as each person came forward to tell their story and receive their sentence, no matter how long we had been waiting, no matter how long the line, this judge would stop. He would read aloud their crime, of course, but then what he did is he took the additional time to explain to the person the problem of why we can't have this happening in our society, of why not obeying this certain law or statute did not only hurt that person, but hurt our community life together. He tried to put what that person did in a larger context, and he did it powerfully. So you're here because you stole somebody's car because you wanted a joyride. Are you aware that you just steal a machine made of metal with 4 wheels? Are you aware that he needed that car to get to work the next day? And because he didn't have a car to get to work the next day, he lost income, and his place of work that was counting on him had to somehow punt and get along without him that day, and his clients and his customers. They couldn't be helped because he wasn't there. Are you aware that the next day his wife had to take off work so she could drive him in their second car and get this all figured out with police insurance? So are you aware when you thought was just a fun joyride to show off to your friends, do you see how it caused harm to its owner, the owner's boss, to his family, to his workmates, to his wife, to his clients? That's why we have a law. You can't steal other people's cars. And that's why today I'm going to sentence you. In a way, you see, that judge, not unlike David, was trying to say there's a goodness to moral and legal order. They're good things. They're not bad. They're needed for all of us to live together. It's needed so we can pull off this project that we call planet Earth, if it's going to work. And you can't break the moral structure of the universe without also breaking yourself. Well, it appears that the author of this song now is getting a headache, thinking about all this infinite God and how he created all this wonderful stuff that's both seen and unseen. But he signs off. God, I got to admit, in light of reminding myself how perfect you are, it only reminds me of how imperfect I am. Yes, I want to be in sync and in line with the stars. Instead, I'm a hot mess. I want to be aligned with all of this and with you. David, by his own desire, asks, but who can make me innocent before you? Can I do that? Can I self-align? No. The answer is that we're going to need another miracle of God. Some sort of amazing miracle, like a resurrection or something. Something like God becoming human and taking our place. To give us new energies and new purpose and new vision of how we can align ourselves with heaven. And the good news of the gospel is that our God did that too. The good news is that we're not just left shooting in the dark. God sent us Christ to find us so that we could find him. And then the promise of the gospel is that now all things are moving in this direction. It's only a matter of time when all things will be aligned with heaven. How the heavens will declare God's glory on that day, and each day for an endless eternity, even if there is a day, because there will be no more sun or time or moon. It's almost too much to take in. I mean, how do you respond? What do you say? How can we possibly live and act in light of such power and in the amazing promise of such a gospel? I don't know, because there are no words. Except maybe I can invite us to respond just as David did, and to make our lives a living prayer that sings, "O Lord, my Creator, may the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart, and the paths of my footsteps be pleasing and acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my Redeemer." Amen.